Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Workforce Wellbeing webinar series hosted by WORKWELL, an organization committed to creating healthier and happier places to work. I've been so fortunate to travel the world and work with leaders and organizations on how they create healthier and happier places to work. And one of the things that I've come to understand is that if we're going to meet the moment, we truly have to understand the moment. And our research of more than 7,000 business leaders globally tells us one thing that you probably suspect already, and that is that people are really tired. People are really exhausted, and many of them, including senior level leaders, are feeling isolated and disconnected as a result. And if we're going to meet them where they are, then we really have to provide them with tactical and tangible tools to be more agile and adaptable in the face of constant change. I think if we're paying attention right now, we see that the signs of burnout are everywhere and mental health is on a decline. And we can do something to make that situation better, which is why today we have one of our own WORKWELL facilitators, a partner, a collaborator, and an amazing human being to lead you in a conversation around creating greater psychological safety in the workplace. Janine Hamner Holman is an internationally recognized speaker, best-selling author, and expert in organizational culture change, conscious leadership, inclusion, and emotional intelligence. With experience spanning nonprofit leadership, Fortune 200 companies, and the public sector, Janine brings unique insights into diagnosing and solving organizational challenges. Named by USA Today as a keynote speaker to watch in 2024, Janine has also been recognized by LA Weekly as a trailblazing entrepreneur and won the CXO 2.0 Leadership Award. She will be delivering a TEDx talk in Northeastern University in February 2025, is a member of the Harvard Business Review Advisory Council, and author of Mind the Gap, a thought leader's guide to 21st century conscious leadership. She also hosts the popular podcast, The Cost of Not Paying Attention. Right now, what I want to do is welcome Janine Hamner Holman to the stage. Please, everybody, put your hands together virtually for Janine. Janine, the stage is yours.
Thank you so much, Adam. I am so excited to be with everyone today. And as we go through this information, I'm going to be asking you some questions, and you're going to have an opportunity to interact with me and our team at WORKWELL through the chat. And if you have questions, because as I share this information, some questions may come up for you. If you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and not in the chat so that we can curate that easily. We will also be posting this hopefully on LinkedIn. And so check us out there and engage with that information as well. So you may recognize these two humans. I had an opportunity to have an amazing conversation on his podcast with our own Adam Markel, and we got into some key aspects of psychological safety: mutual trust, open and honest communication, to give you some hints about what we're going to talk about today. So what the heck is this thing called psychological safety? I know probably some of you have done some work in this domain and others maybe not so much. So here's our first opportunity for interaction. If you would please put in the chat what you think psychological safety is. And here's some options to get you going. I'm not sure, but it sounds like it's probably pretty good. Maybe it's being able to be yourself. Everyone knowing that they can take risks. Maybe it's knowing that it's okay to make a mistake or to ask questions. Maybe it's permission to whine or slack off. Maybe it's a culture in which leaders invite others to participate. Maybe it's a culture where it's easier to speak up than it is to remain silent. Maybe it's where leaders welcome ideas and bad news. equally. So if you would put in the chat what you think that it might be, awesome. And so we are having people guess that it's being able to be yourself, knowing that it's okay to take risks and make mistakes, ask questions, leaders participating and asking others to participate. It's essentially everything on this list except permission to whine and slack off. So let's get into a little bit more about what psychological safety is about. This beautiful woman here is Dr. Amy Edmondson at the Harvard Business School. And she is the person who originally coined this term, psychological safety. And really what it's about is being able to show and employ your best self and bring your ideas and your concerns without fear of negative consequences to self-image or to status or to your career. It's connected to, but not the same as trust. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And it's being able to ask questions, raise concerns, be authentic, learn, engage, collaborate, ask for help, admit mistakes, or even to criticize a project. So why is it important in the workplace? Well, Stan and Kyle are right, because I did kind of make it matter. So let's look at what is created when you have psychological safety in the workplace. I am going to let you know some of the things that psychological safety causes. When you hear one that you sound like that would make it worth it. And we can have psychological safety inside of any kind of organization. So it can be a for-profit business, a nonprofit business, a city. It can be an agency. It can also be something like your family or your house of worship. Anytime we get a group of people together, we either create conditions for psychological safety or we don't create conditions for psychological safety. And psychological safety, it's kind of like a North Star. It's something that we're always striving for once we know about it and what it can cause in the workplace. And so when you hear something that would make it worth it to your organization, to your family, to your whatever, please put that in the chat. So because I'm an organizational development consultant, most of these things are in the domain of organizations. It creates increased productivity. It improves employee retention and lower turnover. It leads to innovation, higher levels of engagement, increased customer satisfaction, less office drama, and you could insert any kind of organization in that space, less home drama, less house of worship drama. We make fewer mistakes when we are working inside of an organization with psychological safety. And we're going to go through kind of the different elements of psychological safety and how these things are created. But we make fewer mistakes and we correct them faster when we have psychological safety present. Stronger organizational reputation, improved financial performance, both lower costs and higher revenue, enhanced organizational alignment, and organizational resilience in times of change. I don't know about you, but me, my business, and all of the organizations that I have the privilege with whom to work, we've all been going through times of change. And so developing organizational resilience can be incredibly helpful and important. So to look a little bit about how this works and really what happens when we don't have psychological safety, we're going to do a bit of a case study. So Boeing Airlines is Boeing is a maker of airplanes. They make airplanes for all major airlines, both commercial and non-commercial. There were many decades where Boeing did extraordinary things by focusing on really only three things: excellence, safety, and ingenuity. Those three virtues were seen as key to profitability and stability. And it worked beautifully. Then the company was taken over by a group that decided Wall Street was the be all and end all. I work for a similar kind of company that went through that kind of transition where Wall Street became the only thing that was focused on. Thankfully, they didn't end up with results like this, but it can be a really significant problem for organizations when the only thing they start focusing on is Wall Street performance. What happened with Boeing was that two planes crashed, one in Indonesia, one in Africa. All Boeing-made planes were grounded for almost 2 years. Then their planes were put back to service. And that's when a Boeing plane flying for American Airlines had a door come off after takeoff. There has been a lot of talk about Boeing, as this headline says. Their CEO was forced to resign. Netflix did a whole show about a whole movie about what's happened at Boeing. They had to plead guilty to fraud. And this red line is an indication of what has happened to their stock prices in the intervening time. Many of the challenges and headlines that ensued can be traced back to the fact that there was zero psychological safety within the organization. So people couldn't speak up when problems were discovered. And the only way that this stuff eventually started coming to light was there were congressional hearings and other such investigations, the NTSB, other agencies involved. In addition, there were whistleblowers who came forward only because of the whistleblower protections. And what became really clear was that the organizational culture at Boeing was structured such that if people spoke up, they were punished. That is what we call a culture of psychological danger. I've worked for these kinds of organizations. If you have too, please write danger in the chat. Thank you. So with these organizations, just like at Boeing, just like where I worked, there was a fear of admitting mistakes. And so what happens then is people throw other people under the bus. They blame other people. And then what happens is nobody wants to tell the truth about what's actually going on, which then leads to really poor decision making. Because if leaders don't know what's actually happening, they can't make good decisions. On the other hand, what we're working on creating is organizations that have a hallmark of psychological safety, where people are comfortable admitting mistakes. They're able to learn from their failures. Everybody shares ideas openly and can question things like, hey, I'm not really sure this is such a great idea, this thing that we're talking about. In those conditions, better decisions are able to be made because people actually know what's really happening. We are now in this new normal. It is really being driven by both the relentless pace of change happening within organizations and the demands of the two younger workforces, the two younger generations in the workforce, the millennials and the Gen Zs. What's happening is that the millennials have now become the largest group in the workforce. And the oldest millennials are right now 43, about to be 44 in 2025. The oldest Zoomers, Gen Zers, they are 28, about to be 27. And so these aren't kids anymore. And they are demanding very different things in the workplace. This is actually what I'm going to get to do my TEDx talk in February about at Northeastern University, about which I'm very excited. And Forbes just came out with a report showing that 52% of the population worldwide are now under 30 years old. When I heard that, I was taken aback. But what all of that means is that there are enormous changes and pressure being put on the workforce driven by these generations. One of the biggest is this. So this is from the New York Federal Reserve's latest poll of consumers, which found that 28.4% of respondents are looking for a job. This is the highest since it was in March of 2014. That includes people during the Great Resignation, right? So this is higher than it was during the Great Resignation. And it doesn't include all of the people who are thinking about or sort of passively looking for a job. When we include those people, buckle your seatbelts, my friends, here's what we're looking at. So you may notice that this top headline says that nearly 50% of people are considering leaving their jobs. And then there is this that we have circled here in the WORKWELL green color, this percentage. 85% of people are thinking about or planning on looking for a new job in 2025 in the US. So the 50% number, that's a worldwide number. 85% of people in the US say that they plan on looking for a new job in 2025. All of this means that as part of the new normal, we have to create ways of keeping people engaged in our organizations. Well, we're going to do that by focusing on psychological safety. And as this slide shows, there are really 4 key domains of psychological safety: belonging, trust, open and honest communication, and reframing failure. And we're going to break down each one of these. So belonging is this tricky thing because the workplace was never designed for belonging. And when I was a kid growing up, when my parents and grandparents were growing up, belonging was really created in your family, in your nuclear family, in your extended family, in your neighborhood, in your community, in your houses of worship, through your schools. And then, kids would become friends with other kids and parents would become friends. That's how my parents developed a lot of their friends when I was especially in grade school. And so many things, however, have happened since I was a kid. And the biggest one is this. And the reality is that younger people, and remember, we just heard that 52% of the whole world is now under 30 years old. These folks are digital natives. They grew up with these devices. And they are looking for belonging, in part because of the dissolution of some of those institutions, and in part because of how amorphous the line between work and not work has become. People, especially young people, are looking to create belonging in the workplace. When workplaces take that on, the results are significant. So 50% lower turnover, 75% fewer sick days used, 56% increase in job performance when we get about the business of creating belonging in the workplace. So then let's look a little bit about trust. As we all know, trust is the foundation of all healthy relationships. And in the tech world, famously, they talk about, we want to fail fast, we want to fail well, we want to fail forward. You can only do that in a tech or any other kind of organization, including a family, when there is a high trust culture, one that comes with high levels of psychological safety and listening. Many of these four elements, belonging, trust, open and honest communication, and reframing failure, by design, build on and overlap with each other. So modeling honesty, one of the things that is key to trust, is a key component of reframing failure, which is also part of the next thing, which is open and honest communication. So to give you an idea of how all of these work together, I am notorious for saying something to my husband that sounds like, I will be home at 6:30 tonight. The problem is I usually roll in around 7:15, 7:30. Each time I do that, I break trust with my husband. My opportunity, however, each time is to practice honest and open communication and reframe my failure. I said I'd be home at 6:30. I roll in at 7:30. I have failed. Instead, however, of focusing on, oh man, I failed, I stink, right? Which we sometimes have a tendency to do. Instead, I get to say, you know what? I did it again. I said I was going to be home at 6:30 and I'm home at 7:30. I apologize. And I'm really working on getting better at estimating how long things are going to take me. So it used to be there was a bigger gap. It's now down to 45 minutes to an hour. And sometimes I nail it. One of the things that my husband and I have gotten better at is being in partnership around this, because it's an area in which I am very challenged. And so often he will call me sometime around 5 and check in about, how's it looking? What time do you think you might be able to be home? All of this then creates a coherency, an ability to be count-onable. There's a coherency between what we say and what we do, which is key to trust. The next element is open and honest communication. A big part of this is being count-onable. Another part of this is what is often called active listening. So when we actively listen, we check in with the other person. What I heard you say was this. Did I get it? Did I miss anything? Because we often selectively listen, and we're going to talk about that at the very end of our time together, how we listen. Practicing active listening is a really great way both to foster trust and to create open and honest communication. Another way to do that is to provide productive and frequent feedback. Another way to do that is by creating two-way communication. So many people, when they do what I am getting to do here with you today, which is mostly spout off about things that I know some stuff about, we think that we have communicated with somebody else. It's a one-way communication, mostly. I'm asking occasionally for your input and your thoughts, but mostly this is me talking to or at you. This is not effective two-way communication. And so when we really want to communicate with somebody, we have to make space for them, for their ideas, for their input. Another thing that's often people in organizations forget about is getting clear on preferred methods of communication. It can depend upon the situation. It can also depend very much on the human. I am getting to work with a law firm right now. And one of the things that's becoming clear is that there are 4 partners in this law firm, and Sean really only wants texts. Henry really only wants emails. Eric really wants you to pick up the phone, and on and on and on it goes. And so we get to get really clear about how the person with whom we're wanting to communicate likes to be communicated with. And then we get to embrace that, whether or not it's our preferred communication style, because the point of this is two-way communication. Another thing that can be really tricky for organizations is this idea around transparency, often sometimes commingled with vulnerability, and this idea of doing both positive and negative updates with your people. So I don't know if you saw it, but in the early days of the COVID pandemic, the CEO of Airbnb came out with the most amazing email, which went viral, because what he said in it is, so we have this pandemic called COVID-19, which means that nobody's going to travel or leave their home, and certainly nobody is going to invite anybody else into their home, and that's our whole business model. So I don't know what we're going to do. What I do know is that we're going to figure it out. All of us putting our heads together, we're going to figure it out. And they did, and they are thriving. And so that kind of communication as a leader in an organization, when we can be honest with people and say, you know what, I have no idea exactly what we're going to do, but I know that we're going to get through it. And part of how we're going to get through it is together. That is a really great example, among other things, of reframing failure. They were in a position of potential failure. And what he said was, we're going to get through it together. I don't know if you have seen the video, which has also gone viral, of Giannis Antetokounmpo, who schooled the world on failure after the #1 ranked Milwaukee Bucks were defeated in the 2022-2023 NBA season. They had lost to the Heat, and he was asked by a reporter. If you haven't seen it, all you got to do is Google Greek Freak, which is his nickname, Giannis Antetokounmpo. He is Greek, obviously Greek and African. And Greek Freak failure. and this video is going to come up. What he does is a reporter asks him about if their season was a failure. And the same reporter asked him this same question the previous year. And what he says over the course of this 2.5-minute video is that failure has no place in sports. Failure? Sports? Like this is the domain in which we talk about winners and losers. How can failure not have a place in sports? And what he says is that all failure is an opportunity to learn. We as humans have to fail in order to succeed. And so when we can reframe failure, when we can make it something that happens in all organizations, and then we can talk about it, it normalizes honesty, demonstrates that it's safe to take risks and admit mistakes and seek feedback openly, avoid blame, and focus on solutions. Organizations thrive in those kinds of conditions, as do their people. Because the reality is that we can only do our best if we feel safe, when we feel safe. Another way to look at this, if you're thinking like, this all sounds kind of interesting, but how do I figure out where my organization might need some help, is to look at gaps. And so there are 3 key gaps that you can look at. One is around trust, and we've talked a lot about trust. The second is around unclear communication, which of course, honest and open communication and reframing failure both go in there, and lack of support, and embedded in there is also trust and clear and honest communication. You may notice that open and honest communication is a through line in all of these areas and looking at all of these areas. So bypassing trust, because we've already talked about that, we get into unclear expectations. So I'm going to give you a different way to think about expectations. Often, what expectations are unmet, unverbalized needs. So you know it's an expectation if there's a should that comes with it. And this is easiest to see actually in our interpersonal relationships, especially those that are the closest to us, our spouses and partners, our parents and children, those interpersonal relationships in which we are the most enmeshed. And so if there's a should in there, they should know better. He should know how to empty the dishwasher, right? I shouldn't have to tell them to clean up their clothes, but we do it in the workplace as well. She should know what is expected. I shouldn't have to tell them all the time the different elements of that. They should just know, except if it's not happening, they don't know. So what we get to do is we get to transform it into an accountability. An accountability, I'm also going to give you a different way to look at that word. So in this context of expectations and moving from expectations to accountabilities, what we want to do is create a partnership with somebody. And so I might say, could you please be accountable for this cup? And this cup is really important to me. It keeps things cold for hours and hours. You might be hearing as I move a little bit, there's ice in this cup. Right now in California, it's 2:36 p.m. I put this ice in here last night. So it keeps things cold for an incredibly long period of time. What being accountable for this would look like is you coming and checking every 2 hours to see if I need more water, because as I'm aging, staying hydrated is super important. And so come and check every 2 hours, see if it needs more water. And if it needs more water, put cold water in it, please. And then remind me to take a drink when you bring it back. So I've now created both why this is important, what it creates for me, and what success for you is going to look like. Instead of being clear like that, usually what we do is some version of this. We say, please go get me a rock. We don't say what kind of rock. We don't say whether it's rough or smooth or big or small or white or brown or black. I had a boss who used to forever say, make this document better. What's the problem with the document in the first place? Is it too long? Is it too short? Does it not have enough examples? Does it have too many examples? Is the font wrong? Is the grammar poor? Like, what's the problem? But she would never tell me. And so I would come back with a rock, and she'd say, that's not the right rock, right? And then we would go back and forth. Instead, we get to get clear with people and transform our expectations into accountabilities so that people know what success is going to look like. The last domain is around lack of support. And there are three key arenas here. The first is lack of guidance, which could look like unclear expectations. Another place to look is recognizing achievements and recognizing effort. Sometimes we work really hard on something and whatever it is that we're looking to create doesn't happen. Recognizing effort in addition to recognizing achievement can be super motivating for people. Being available to answer questions is also a key part of guidance. Encouraging collaboration and promoting work-life harmony. I'm not a work-life balance human because it's very difficult to achieve balance. Instead, let's focus on harmony because that can be individualized to the individual human. Because what harmony looks like for me may be very different from what harmony looks like for you. Another area where we may have lack of support is in the area of resources. So when we really think about it, we only have three resources: time, energy, and money. And so it may be that what we need is the ability to focus other people's attention. We may need the ability to call meetings. We may need education or training or an in-house learning portal, which we can help you with here at WORKWELL. You may need a budget. So you may need resources in order to do whatever it is that you're seeking to do or create. Or when you're looking at how we do with psychological safety, we may not be very good at spreading out or inquiring about whether or not people have the resources that they need to succeed. It may look like lack of mentoring opportunities. And mentoring opportunities are both fantastic for us in the older generations, as well as folks in the younger generations. Recent studies have shown that mentoring, both for mentors and mentees, is a very important way, actually the best way, to increase employee engagement. So if you're wondering right now, I wonder how my organization is doing on psychological safety, here is a very easy way to find out. You can either take a screenshot of this or grab the QR code with your phone or grab the URL workwelllabs.com/psychological safety, and it will take you to a free 2-minute psychological safety audit, which comes with a report, and you'll be able to find out how you're doing on psychological safety. And if all of this sounds interesting, we would love to connect with you. You might be interested in having us curate a conversation for your organization, or maybe a client or a partner of yours, whether it's a keynote or a workshop series or a more inclusive process or some other way of bringing all of this information to life in your space. Please email us at teams@workwelllabs.com. And so I promised that we were going to end with a little bit about how we all normally listen. So here are the lenses through which we normally listen to other people. What's the point? What does this have to do with me? What do I think about that they are saying? What else do I have to say? What else do I want to know? Why are you telling me this? What do you need from me? Is there a problem? Is there a problem, and what's the point? Those often go together. How am I doing? And my very favorite, what's wrong with me, or what's wrong with them? Instead, we have an opportunity to listen differently. We can listen through the lens of curiosity and listen to learn. What does this information tell me about them? What does this information tell me about their lived experience? What does this information tell me about what's important to them? That's when we get real psychological safety in organizations. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And I'm excited now to take a look at the Q&A and see if we have any questions.
And Janine, if there aren't any questions in the Q&A, if there are folks that would like to unmute themselves and ask a question live, we can do that, because we're about, I want to say, 6 minutes-ish from completing, because most important to us is that we don't sort of run to the top of the hour, because many of you have another thing at the top of the hour, and we want to give you time to take care and recharge and work on how it is that you develop your own resiliency, and we're not going to contribute to anything that would get in the way of that. So if you've got a question for Janine and want to unmute yourself, you can at this time, or raise your hand. We can do that as well. Janine, while we're waiting and looking to see, I see April Beyer has a raised hand. That's fantastic. So April, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Hi, April.
Hi, Janine. How are you? This is great. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for participating.
I love this. I have a question about the mentorship. So how would a leader, I agree, it's so important. How would a leader bring this about or make themselves available to this mentorship without taxing themselves with added time? What is the sort of framework with that do you recommend?
Well, here's the thing. It is going to come with added time. Anything that is important to us. So I remember, a couple of years ago when I was turning 40, I decided that I was going to learn to scuba dive. And I was going to learn to scuba dive when I had the time, when I was going to be going someplace where I could dive, and when I had the money. And then as I was turning 40, I realized, okay, I'm never going to have the time. I'm never going to have the money. And I live in Southern California, 26 miles across the proverbial road, ocean from us is Catalina Island, surrounded by the world's largest kelp forest. So I set aside the time and I set aside the money to learn how to dive. And that's what we get to do with anything that's going to be important to us. And so being a mentor or being a mentee takes time. It takes that resource. And so then if we know we want to be a mentor, then the question is, who do we want to mentor and around what? Do we want to mentor people in the organization in which we are? In which case it might be talking to somebody about, do we have a mentorship program? And if not, could we create a mentorship program? Because I heard this thing about how it's really great at promoting engagement, both on the part of the mentor and on the part of the mentee. And so could we work on creating that? And I would be part of that, but I don't necessarily want to lead it, right? So you could bring some other resources to bear. It may be that you want to be a mentor to young people. So you might want to connect up with an organization like the Boys and Girls Club or Big Brothers Big Sisters. It may want to be that you want to mentor in some other kind of way. You may have specific skills that organizations might be looking for. So there can be all kinds of ways to mentor. And as we age, one of the things that we want to do is to pass that information that we have learned, that wisdom that we have gotten, on to other folks. And so creating opportunities to mentor other people is a really great use of time and energy.
Yeah.
Thanks, April.
I so love the question and love the answer that you provided, Janine, in part because it's not formulaic, is it?
No, it's not.
And I think, we tend to, especially in the more organizational development circles, kind of lean into, what's the system, what's the process? Is there a three-step, a five-step? And so many of the nonfiction books are kind of couched in those simple terms, right?
Right.
Yeah. I love what you
we
said.
want there to be a pill and an easy thing for everything. And some things there just isn't.
Look, I think as an initial matter, if you realize that you could be of value to other people around you and you have an interest in serving, then there are opportunities for mentorship, or you can, as you say, create them and even ask for resources to help to facilitate those things as well. But there's no question that it's a commitment. It'll be a commitment of time and energy and primarily at the beginning, just the intent to be involved in something like that. So as we wrap this up in just a minute here, Janine, is there anything, just to sort of, you're not going to tie this up in a nice neat bow, just like I said, it's not meant to be the case, but it's really an opening for a conversation. I'm sure there are many people that are thinking as they're listening to this, how psychologically safe is the team that I'm a part of, or the organization that I work for, or maybe even, outside of even the sort of work terms, how psychologically safe is the environment that I live in? So I think that once again, that very quick 2-minute assessment is really vital. I will say this, we're going to provide handouts. One of the wonderful things about this webinar series, the WORKWELL webinar series, is not only are we going to every single month present new content through someone that I just, it's a high bar that you've set already, Janine, because you have just such a wonderful way of communicating, and I love your sense of humor. I love just how real you are and present you are in the moment. So it's a high bar for people following you to do that. But the intent is that each time we'll have some really great content, a fantastic person to deliver it, and we'll have follow-up materials that will assist so that the conversation can continue. So of course, anybody that's interested in finding out more about how you could bring Janine in to serve in your organization, speak to your team, or there are many other ways that we could chat about that. You can go to team@workwelllabs.com to find out more information about that. And in those handouts, you will also get access once again to that QR code to take the assessment and find out just a little bit about the psychological safety in the environment that you're most curious about it. But I want to give you the last word as we wrap up here, Janine. Anything you want to say to the folks about this topic as we wind down?
Well, I think I'll end sort of where we began, which is that this domain of psychological safety, there's a lot of different elements in it. And if you think like, oh, that feels like a lot, you don't have to, it's like the old joke about an elephant. You start one bite at a time. You start by focusing on one thing. And psychological safety can really serve as a North Star, as this is what we're striving for. This is what we're going for. And sometimes we're going to be great at it, and sometimes we're not. And then that's an opportunity to look at, all right, so where were we great? Where were we not so much? And how might we do it differently next time? It's just, it's all an opportunity to learn.
Sounds like the feedback loop, but that's a conversation for another day. We're going to leave it right there. Everybody have a beautiful rest of your day, your evening, wherever in the world we're finding you at this moment. Again, we so thank you for your time and your willingness to participate. And we'll see you again very soon with the next webinar series starting in just about a month. Okay, take care, everybody. And thank you, Janine. You were amazing, as always.
Thanks.